Thank you so much. I think we have enough of people who are interested in this topic, but definitely I have a very strong lineup of panelists. So thanks to Bivot, the IIT initiative for World of Technology, and also to look at the initiatives that the pharma industry looks at. Now, this platform that we are here on discussing the pharma industry and technology for the last, I've been hearing about in the different sectors. We're not different in the pharma industry, but definitely there's a lot of interest shown in the last couple of years' time since the pandemic. And the government initiative, the pharma industry initiative, have been quite important and quite critical in ensuring that this industry grows. Most important for us is the quality, affordability, and swift to market is the keywords for this industry. And as you all know, that this industry, especially the pharma industry in India, brings in a lot of support to the entire world. And no wonder we are one of the largest suppliers to the pharma industry across different geographies. It's an honor to have a conversation with all the panel members. Nice to see you, Abhijit and Mahesh and Krishna on this panel. Work with them very closely. So it's always a pleasure to have a discussion. I'm sure that with their experience, they will bring in a lot of insight into what can be done and what's been done so far and how this industry is going to expand in the next couple of years' time. As normally when I conduct these sessions, I'm called for as a moderator. There's somebody in the panel who is as a head of quality. But here I don't have anybody as head of quality, but definitely quality means a lot to all of these people. So to start with, I'll ask this question to each one of them. We'll start with Mahesh. How would you describe quality as expected in the pharma industry?
I think the best way to describe, first of all, thank you for inviting. And as you said, the members in the audience who are here are truly interested. So that's why we appreciate your presence and also appreciate the opportunity for a dialogue. And I think it's actually very appropriate, Rajiv, that you're starting with the question of quality, because I think we have to think about quality in the pharmaceutical industry as not as a department or not as a function, but quality as the outcome of the work that we do, which then means that quality is embedded in everything. And then the concept that the FDA has been talking about for years together, called QBD, quality by design, is not just a concept, but actually starts to show up in the work output that we do. And in the pharmaceutical industry, we also have to realize that there's essentially two things that you generate. One is product that goes to the customer, which is the end user or the patient. There's also the documentation that goes to the regulator. When you start looking at both of these as outcomes, which both need to have a very high element of quality built in there, then you have the right focus of making sure the quality of the product is good, the documentation to support that is good, which then doesn't get us in terms of challenges from a compliance perspective or challenges from a meeting product quality expectations perspective. So I'd really like to frame the conversation around quality in that aspect.
Thanks, Mahesh. Same question to Abhijit. Just to let you know, Abhijit, for the last several years, he has been with Dr. Reddy's Pharma. He was with Levers, and when he moved into Dr. Reddy's, he was part of Levers. But what's important for me to understand that, as you all know, quality is all about consistency, and we have seen rapid advancements of technologies in other industries. So, do you think that the same has been seen in the pharma industry, and do you think the adaptability is there?
Thank you, Rajiv. Meeting of a long time. Look, pharma industry has evolved a lot in the last 10-15 years, and should be, because the regulatory and compliance demand is increasing, and that is the way to go as well. Going a step back, if you look at the genesis of the industry, when you design molecules in the innovation sector, which is supposed to capture the protein, disease-causing protein in the body, the organic chemistry behind it is very, very complex. And where does it, most of the the preparation of those start in the chemistry labs. And historically, if you look at it, pharma industry was a scaled up version of chemistry labs. Typically the way you see round flasks and all those, Bokana funnels, those who are familiar with all this. Engineering was a bit of an alien word in the industry, also in the West in the 80s, and of course, India came in more towards the N90s, most in this century. Two aspects in getting robustness in manufacturing. One is, of course, the quality of development must be very robust. But more importantly, the plants which are manufacturing the chemicals and eventually filling into vials and bottles, they should have equipment which are precise, later more intelligent these days, and future will be more AI-based. So, in the engineer, I can see the evolution of those things in leaps and bounds. Many strides have gone ahead in terms of all the unit operations which are now on the shop floor, well controlled, and it's being backed up by not just automation, instrumentation. It is also becoming more and more intelligent, capturing data, and again, AI would probably guide and sort of the equipment itself in the future. So that is a big good, depending on the industries and who are willing. I think there is enough now on the table to make manufacturing extremely robust. And similarly, in the dosage manufacturing, the cameras which are sort of able to see if a blister pack has one short tablet, or very rapid weighing systems, and the bottle is filled a little less, it throws it out automatically from the line, so on and so forth. And that's a trend of the future, and I think all companies are embracing it. India is not ahead, not behind at all. In fact, the plants are newer, I actually, the earlier part of the year, I was in Italy in an API plant. I was looking at there's still some of the products in glass manufacturing set up, which is long gone.
Thanks, Abhijit. Krishna, you again asked the same question on the quality. What do you expect quality from the pharma industry? That's the first question. And just to follow up on that, what changes have you seen in the pharma industry in the last couple of years' time in terms of research, technology transfers, and commercialization? And specifically, transition from, say, small molecules to the recent biosimilars, which is a buzzword now in the industry.
First, Rajiv, thanks. Thanks to Pivot for this opportunity. I think Mahesh put it very elegantly that I think quality is not a department. It should not be a department. In fact, the way I think about it is you should not have quality assurance in your company, because quality is to be a part of everybody's DNA within an organization. And the only North Star that you need is you may actually take the product that you make tomorrow. So you or your loved one may take that product. So if you put that lens onto it, then quality is an outcome. I think Mahesh mentioned that very, very well. So, and it is not a philosophy. It is not something that is nebulous. I think it is something that has to be embedded. It has to go deep. Everything that we do, we think about the outcome. We think about impact of the patient, quality, the therapeutic effect, the safety. Not necessarily the order of safety first. So I think that is my thinking about philosophy. So when that guides everything that we do in the industry, then I think quality is a natural outcome. And the way I think about this, compliance is a very low bar. Compliance is like a set of rules that prevent you from doing something wrong. So if somebody plays at compliance, then you're actually playing with fire. So you shouldn't be playing at the border of compliance. You should be playing well ahead of it in the realm of quality. So those are my thoughts around quality. Around research, tech transfer, and manufacturing, I think there has not been a single NCE out of India, right? New chemical entity out of India. This has been true. It has been I would call it for the quality of chemistry that we have in India. I think that is something that should be remedied very soon. However, I think in terms of the innovation that we do in supplementing patents and making very, very good generic products that we supply across the world, I I think we do extremely well. The bar of submitting a dossier to a regulatory agency and getting an approval, that bar in the last 10 years, 15 years has significantly increased. There is no question about it. The FDA implemented, the Generic Drug User Fee Act in 2012, and since then, the expectation of what constitutes a submission has become significantly higher. So, and that has increased. That was 12 years ago. Today, that is basic requirement. So, I think with that, the need for more robust development, more robust technology transfer, understanding the science behind the product, the science behind how the product interacts with the equipment and the engineering of the equipment has improved significantly, but I think it still has distance to go, and I think it will always be work in progress. And around small molecules to large molecules, I think this is a natural progression because the ways by which you are treating diseases are changing. They are becoming more and more specific. The molecules are becoming more and more potent. Therefore, targeted delivery becomes very important. We are understanding our genetic makeup much better. Therefore, we are able to target specific diseases in a specific way, and that cannot be done with small molecules, which are very specific, which are non-specific. So, we'll have to go with monoclonal antibodies, CAR-T kind of therapies, which will help us get to that disease state very, very quickly. I think in a couple of decades, we'll probably have a label with our name coming in our house for the specific disease that we have, for the specific genetic condition that we have. That's what I think will happen.
Thanks, Krishna. I think you touched a very important point about India not coming out with the drug, and especially Dr. Reddy. He had a big passion about, was having a lot of things in his heart, and his book about the unfinished agenda. I think it speaks so much volumes about his passion for coming out with the Indian label medicine. So we hope that happens very soon. Coming back to Mahesh, see, as a head of organization, as a CEO, you have to balance your decisions for commercialization of a product with R&D, manufacturing, quality, and regulatory. What do you think are the areas which need focus, and what are the weak links in the whole ecosystem?
Then it's quite a broad question, Rajiv. But I'll start by saying that Syngene is a CRO and a CDMO, which means that we're in the business of doing contract research, contract manufacturing, end to end, really starting with research of brand new entities, because we work mostly with the Western pharma companies, and then of course manufacturing them as well after doing all of the development work and everything in between. So therefore, we don't have much trade-off that we need to look at for what do we put in as resources for our own pipeline, because we don't really have a product pipeline. Now that said, there is still a need to understand how do you decide between when you're supporting clients who need to make such decisions around what is important in research, what's important in development, and where should you put your energy and opportunities in the manufacturing sector. And I think I start by saying this is where more and more technology has been coming. And I think this is not just true as a concept, but it's actually getting really, really embedded in decision making. First and foremost, let's go back to quality. We start with making sure that quality is non-negotiable. So whether you're doing research, whether you're doing development or manufacturing, it doesn't matter. It's going to be about making sure that all of the quality components that you need to have are there. Then it's also about making sure that you operate with a single quality system and start to collect data from the very beginning. In case of research labs, our research labs, for example, use electronic lab notebooks. So gone are the days where you used to write on a paper napkin and then translate that into a lab notebook and then try and understand and make sense of that. That's completely history. And the reason that you start to do that is because that's what is going to help you in decision making later on. Whether it's decision making on which molecules to take forward, or whether it's decision making on looking for efficiencies in the process of drug discovery. So there's a huge component of technology embedment that comes in terms of making such decisions. The other sort of way to look at this is when you're doing development, when you're doing research, and you mentioned the world is moving towards biologics. We heard that earlier as well. So let me give a couple of examples on where you start to collect and not deprioritize data collection in terms of research early on. In the world of biologics, you make molecules that are made in bioreactors. In bioreactors, you want to understand a number of parameters. What is the pH? What is the rate at which the cells are growing? What is the temperature profile? What is the dissolved oxygen profile? So on and so forth. So you want to collect all of that because that can help you later on to prevent a batch from going bad before it has actually gone bad. And so it prevents and it helps you from a cost of poor quality perspective. So collecting that data and using the technology angles become really important. If you go to the small molecule side of it, right, small molecules, very, very similar. You may want to control the rate of addition of something. And now if you've done reactions with different rates of additions and you did not have that data because you were not in the process of collecting all of that data, that doesn't help you solve a deviation later on, or that doesn't help you set your process parameters correctly. So putting all of those pieces together is actually what the trade-off today is. It's not so much about what you do in your pipeline. It's not so much about how do you prioritize each of these components of it. I'll just take one more angle to the pipeline question that you asked. How do you prioritize? And the prioritization, I think we have to look at as twofold. In India, we consider ourselves the pharmacy of the world because we are heavily volume driven. Right? We know this. We are third in volume of all the drugs that are made in the world. We are 14th, however, in value. So we have to look at saying how do we transition from the volume to value player that we really want to be. And that then becomes about where do we bring efficiency in each of the components of this value chain and not just in trying to look for one or the other. Because our real opportunity is to turn that volume into value as opposed to going for one or the other. With that, I'll stop, but I think there's a lot of opportunities there that I believe should be realized, especially as we transition this way.
Thanks, Mahesh. I think you came up with a very good point that India, even though we are called the pharmacy of the world, we're third in the number, the value is much behind. So which means that India is primarily into generics. That's what we started. We do boast about our capabilities in generics and the volumes that we manufacture and the cost that we can bring out. But what's important is that we need to spend efforts on research. So Abhijit, this question is to you that is there something that as an industry and the academia that we have, especially the big institutes which are into research, is there something that we can go beyond the collaboration that we are into, or something can be improvised to really look at coming out with the made in India medicine?
It's a deep question. Let me turn around the question a little bit. Academia certainly can help the industry, but how much is industry nudging, hand-holding, supporting the academia? I think that's extremely important, and I think we have some way to go in this country. Also, government has a role to play, big role to play. The R&D support expenditure is also, I think, should be a focus area, and I'm sure it will be with prosperity and the GDP growing to greater heights. I think that will happen. Right now, percentage GDP per capita here, 0.6 to 0.7% gross R&D is about 1/3 in terms of percentage of, let's leave aside US and Western markets, is 1/3 of China. And considering the Chinese GDP is about 5 times of India in terms of dollars, it's 15 times. Okay? So money has to flow into R&D. Academia has to be given the support. And last but not the least, I think a large part of this academia industry collaboration comes through startups. The startup ecosystem in this country is, sitting in the city of startups, is just sort of beginning to bloom, right? I mean, we have great decades ahead. I mean, I'm very, very optimistic. But those are the 2 or 3 things where industry has to handhold, spend more, government has to support a little bit more, and the startup industry has to also flourish. Academia, I think I would not turn around and ask academia what they are doing. I think they have, sort of supported and, given guided into this collaboration.
Can I add something to that, Abhijit? Because I think what Abhijit has brought up is very interesting about the academia and the government. Now, I was at a similar event that was actually in IIT Bombay last week, and I ran into a startup who's been managing to analyze about 300 metabolites in a bioreactor. And I talked about how biologics are made, and we know that there are many important parameters to understand. They've gone to the extent of understanding 300 parameters, starting to build a database of how those parameters and how those metabolites and how those spent metabolite analysis can help in maintaining the cell culture at the levels that you need. Because in mammalian manufacturing, cell culture goes on for 14 days. You don't want after 14 days to find out that your batch was no good. However, that connect between, to Abhijit's point, that connect between what they are doing and the relevance of that and the opportunity of that in the industry needs to be much more capitalized through such conversations, and then also by government incentivizing them to make this as ready for industry to utilize. So I think that we have a long ways to go, while there are many enablers that are there in different pockets.
Well said. I think just before the session, I was talking to two young IIT graduates who are in the process of looking at different opportunities in pharma. And I spoke to them, I said, there are several opportunities, the early warning system in the industry, and also how we can look at those as avoiding the failures in the products, where this is such a big opportunity for us. Coming back to Mahesh, again to you, like, this is a general question for you. See, when you look at the pharma industry, and especially we talk about the quality, do you think that the initiatives taken by the government of India, and specifically the Drugs Controller General of India office and the Department of Pharmaceutical, will it help minimize the surprises in product quality that we have seen in the recent times, both in India and abroad? I don't know the name of the products, everybody is aware of it, but those are something that really are quite an embarrassing situation for the industry, for people like us, when we hear these examples in countries where the products are going with inferior quality.
So let's address, as they say, elephant in the room, right? And the product quality issues that you're referring to are one-offs that are there from companies that are not doing the right thing. That's actually not the state that is representative of the Indian pharmaceutical industry. I think all three of us sitting here come with backgrounds in different pharmaceutical companies. I've worked both in the US and in India, and I can tell you that we have very high standards of how we work with our chemicals, our pharmaceuticals, our manufacturing processes, and ultimately quality control and quality assurance. So I think while there are some of those pockets of miselements, wrong sorts of decisions that may have been made, which I really don't and can comment on. What we have to look at is what is the process that and the encouragement and the support that the Indian regulatory system is offering for making sure we have high emphasis on product quality. And I think the DCGI or the CDSCO office is actually doing a lot in that area. Let's just take the example of the new medical devices regulation that has come up. This is something that is groundbreaking. It never happened for decades together, and now it has happened. Let's take the example of what they've done on the side of biosimilars. They've started to go through a very rigorous process of collecting all of the industry input, looking at what's happening in different parts of the globe so that our biosimilars guideline is in line with what's happening around the world. And so on and so forth. Right? So there's a number of things that are happening. Now, is that enough? I would never say it's enough, because there's a lot more that needs to happen. I think there's more training that we need to do. We need to have many more drug regulators around the country that are trained within the country and outside. We also need to have an approach with the regulators and the industry that's a friendlier approach. We start out with an approach that sometimes is about, well, you have been doing something wrong, and we're going to look for what is it that has been going on wrong. That's not the best way for a relationship to be built. I think a lot of that is getting addressed, getting improved. the amount of energy that is being spent both on training new staff, collaborating with industry, and bringing in new guidances, I believe we are all heading in the right direction. There will also then be the need to understand what is emerging threats, right? And I'll give an example of something that has hit the entire industry, not just Indian industry or anything. The nitrosamines. We were not talking about nitrosamines as a issue a few years back because it wasn't known. Now that it has been known, everybody's gotten on the bandwagon rather quickly, making sure that they have the technologies to address that sort of a problem, making sure that there are regulations and the standards available to do that. And I think this is again where I see that the CDFC and the DCI office is partnering a lot and doing a fantastic job with making sure that there's regulation around that, which is in line with the world standards.
That's true. Just to let you know that the DCG, the Drugs Control of India, happens to work with Dr. Reddy's and he's a hardcore R&D formulation person. So even when he became the DCGI and we have conversations with him, it's so easy to have communication with him. He understands the importance, he understands the requirement of the industry. Unlike in the past where it was only the bureaucrats who were taking these positions, but now we have a person who comes from the pharmaceutical background, and we hope and we expect a lot of things from him in the coming years. So that's good to hear. Thanks, Mahesh. Krishna, this question to you. Given that India has made good progress in the global market in the pharma industry, what do you think are the next steps or additional steps that can be taken to continue momentum and to boost, say, manufacturing growth? When we have reached certain level, but there's something that additional can be done.
Yeah, broad question, Rajiv. I will answer it in the domain in which I'm working in. So I think the natural progression towards larger molecules, biologics, will continue, and we will, as a country, we will jump into it. We're already doing a lot of the work in all the companies. But I think if you look at the first case why India became very successful in generic manufacturing, and many of the companies from the West came to India for manufacturing, was low cost and high quality. Now, the definition of quality over a period of time has increased, it has become greater and greater and greater, and therefore, it has now been associated with quality itself. Right? So, if you go to companies, you'll see that often their most efficient factories are the factories which supply to India and to what we call as low regulated markets. Right? So I think this concept of efficient manufacturing and autonomous workplace is something that India needs to really embrace and try and become more and more efficient. For a per capita productivity, for a per person productivity between India and let's say a factory in Europe, Europe is far more productive. And this has got nothing to do with cost, right? How many, for example, there is a metric that says how many thousands of, or how many millions of tablets or capsules per person does a pharmaceutical factory produce. This is a productivity metric. You think about it, many of the factories in India will actually have lower than some of the factories in Europe. So while there still is a case for cost, but I think there is a very strong case for us to become more and more efficient, and that will only happen if there are two elements. There's one, there is a human side to it, which is culture, taking ownership. We spoke about quality earlier. Quality always comes ahead of cost. That is a philosophy that needs to be firmly embedded into our factories. The second element is thinking about new technologies and actually really forgetting about end-of-line testing becoming our primary method of control of quality. Mahesh put it very, very well, is control of our processes should actually permit and allow for parametric release. Not really at the end of the line, why should we test anything? So these kind of thoughts should come into our pharmaceutical manufacturers, because it's a long road that we can actually traverse before we call ourselves the most efficient manufacturer. And this is applicable to all industries, whether it is our bulk drug industry, whether it is our oral solids, injectables, biologics. And I would go far to say, Mahesh, it is applicable for our CDMO business as well. I think we have a long way to go in becoming extremely efficient. So that will actually make us more reliable. It will become India will truly become a reliable partner for patients worldwide. But it will also bring our costs down progressively. And I think the efficiencies that we can gain, in my view, and maybe much higher than that, is in multiples of X. It is not in fractions. So I think that is an untapped area. And that to me is the next frontier. And Industry 4.0 is going to play a very, very important role in that, because as our equipment become more and more connected, more real-time data, more ability for us to look at lead indicators rather than wait for results, and then influencing the process in a positive way to get a good outcome. These are areas that I think the engineers are going to play a very important role in. That's what Abhijit mentioned as well. Is engineers are going to play a very important role in understanding equipment parameters and how that actually indicates quality of a product before it goes bad and influences quality.
Just to add, what Krishna said, today Indian pharma industry is give or take 50 billion, exports of 25 billion plus, and lot of headroom ahead of us. In the legacy areas of API, CDMO, finished dosage, biosimilars, I'm talking of just these sectors itself has huge headroom for growth. And the reason is simple, and very simple mathematical terms. If you have a gross margin of, let's say, give or take 50%, and final EBITDA of, let's say, 20 to 25%, the delta, four factors. Manufacturing, basically the manpower cost for manufacturing, you have repairs and maintenance, you have R&D, and have sales and distribution. So not just the only manpower in manufacturing, but all the other aspects you see, it's by far, we have a cost arbitrage advantage, at least today, and for probably at least a couple of decades. And quality has reached global. I fully, completely agree with Krishna and Mahesh. I think we've come a long way. There is, of course, always scope for improvement. But given this, the headroom is huge in this sector. So I think the industry has to think a lot. 5.4 billion of the world population, excluding China as emerging markets, not fully addressed in many. Not just the pharma side, the healthcare also is very important aspect, how we take it there, and in industries beginning to reach out in these areas. So, I think the potential is huge, and the industry should look at it, those who have decades ahead of them should look at it with great optimism ahead.
Thanks, that's a good insight, Abhijit. There's one question that I would like to ask all of you. We'll talk about all these current manufacturing and the requirement of the industry for automation or technology upgradation. A lot of youngsters do come to us to ask for what are the areas that we can support, and they're very keen to support. And I was fortunate enough to work with a very young IT graduate from Mumbai, and he really came out with a very good software for the industry, and he's trying to build it more and more. I'm sure there are several examples of those kinds which can be brought in. But do you think that there are any technology challenges that we may have in our industry, especially given that we are regulated by the guidelines and the regulatory inspections, which are so much, the companies are under pressure. So do you think that there are any technology challenges if you were to bring in? When you look at some other industries, we see so much of automation, so much of technology, but we are really, our hands are tied up for not bringing. So maybe I can ask Abhijit and then Mahesh and Krishna.
Okay, I'll take a shot and hand over to you. So, look, I mean, the industry, Rajiv, you know the best actually coming from the quality domain. We have embraced EQMS for a while now, right? And eventually, I think AI will come into EQMS fold to sort of not just being managing it through the electronically, but also guiding it by capturing and the data and leading to the problem areas and all that. The same thing is true for the manufacturing areas. But the bigger aspect of technology, in my view, because pharma is just one part of the cost. It's not a large cost in taking healthcare to the patient for curing a disease. a large part is still the point of healthcare where improvement technology trying to ease up and reduce cost of a patient getting the right treatment, whether it is diagnostic equipments, the flow of patient to the doctor, the other treatment aspects of it. There's a massive amount of cost involved in that, and pharma can play a big role. A quick example: one of the leading nephro chains in India, I will name it, has brought in, sort of dialysis equipment is all digitalized and taken a patent on it. These are the things which will help them to deliver, error-free sort of treatment to the patients at a lower cost. And then the big thing is Indian industry has to think of how to take it into the emerging market. In my view, I think West has its own great advantages, value, but entry barriers because matured areas. But I know I'm a few companies I'm on the board of. We are seeing immense opportunity to sort of take the healthcare to the patients in emerging parts of the world. Opening up hospitals there, opening up nephro chains, and there's massive potential.
Let me just add a different perspective. I think what Abhijit has got is fantastic, right? There's real life examples of where things are happening that are really touching lives. If we move up the value chain and start to say, where in the pharmaceutical industry per se, I think there's two ways to look at it. Let's look at the bigger picture of where can you bring in a whole new technology and sort of ease a problem, or where can you bring in incremental. Given that the pharmaceutical industry is so regulated, it's better to look at the incremental because those are easier changes that you can get to the regulatory system and so on. And I think I'll offer some examples, right? Even if we start using digital twin approaches for deciding which formulation is better, when you're screening so many formulations, as opposed to trying to do each and every formulation, making that formulation and then testing it, digital twin approaches can ease that process for you. If you just stay on the digital twin approach, you can also look at that for simulating which product to make on your line next, based on how the rest of the data of that product is happening, or the rest of the data of your entire product line is going on, right? So what is the uptake, what is the consumption, what is the shelf life, what are the raw materials that you have in your warehouse, put all of that together and then make a decision around what is the next batch that you're going to fill or what is the next batch that you're going to do. Then there is the opportunity on things to do with OEE. How do you improve OEE through such digital approaches? And I think some of those examples are very obvious. I'll offer a sort of another opportunity area, if you will, which is around the understanding of equipment performance, equipment shelf life, equipment history. Now, if we can have all of that, because that's another area that the regulators, when they come in on, they want to understand that yes, all of your equipment has gone to the right level of calibration, the right level of equipment installation, all the way from the design to the last use that it had. And how do you get that in a seamless way? And the moment that there was an interruption, put in an automation, put in an interlock that the equipment cannot be used. These are the kinds of solutions that we can actually bring. Make sure, and this are things that even the smallest of the MSMEs will embrace. Because today, one of the challenges that I often see in embracing technology is the MSME sector often believes, well, it's not for me yet. It's too expensive. Will I get a return? These are things that actually offer you the returns. And then the last one that I'll also talk about is with regards to sensors, right? Implementing a number of sensors which are not so expensive anymore get you a lot of information on your equipment performance. Start to use that in predictive maintenance. Build a database loop, which always is appealing to regulators, that you make decisions based on your data, and therefore you're not just randomly going and doing something every 6 months, because you know what, historically we've been used to looking at it every 6 months. So I think that there are a lot of these opportunities, and I think India, based on the fact that we are so technologically advanced, just look at how much India has progressed in fintech. And to me, I think instead of now calling biotech, we need to call tech bio. India needs to look at it and say, just what we did in fintech, let's do in bio, let's do in biologics, let's do in biotech and pharma, and put the tech word before bio, so that we start to give that emphasis and bring value from all of this.
Great insight, Mahesh. Krishna?
Yeah, so I completely embrace what Mahesh mentioned, and I'll add to something that Abhijit said. I think technology also allows us to go today from managing illness to actually managing health. So it's a completely different thinking. And managing wellness, I will call it, rather than illness, has a very large positive impact on the overall costs of managing health for the country as a whole. Because and illness management is a drag on the economy. It reduces productivity, it reduces ability for overall, we have to call it happiness index of the system. India leads, unfortunately, many chronic diseases. Within the population that has gotten diagnosed, is still very high in terms of diabetes and heart conditions and all that. So I think managing wellness and lifestyle is something that we can deploy much better using technology. So this is a great opportunity. The second is diagnostics, as Abhijit mentioned. I think India probably, of course, owing to the population, but also because of lack of awareness, there are many people in this country who do not get diagnosed well in advance. So they actually reach the hospital or their physician at a point where there is no return. So very unfortunate. So how can we deploy technologies that can actually go down to the grassroots? Today there is a mobile in every village. How can that be leveraged appropriately for actually getting diagnosis up? And the third is global, and I'm sure I don't have the Indian numbers, but globally, the biggest problem with actually healthcare is adherence to taking medication. Some statistics put it at 60%, even in the United States. So people do not take medication according to the regimen that has been prescribed. So how can therapeutics actually help? How can digital therapeutics, how can digital nudging, or technologies that is so easily available with us today actually help us in getting people to reminders, whatever it may be, right? Maybe even a Pokayoki solution that will poke somebody to take a medication. I don't know, but I think these are vastly underexplored areas. And I just want to add one more point to what Mahesh mentioned. Is we need to transition today. We have so much technology, so many equipment with servo motor controls and data that you can sit down in Bombay and see your equipment in Ahmedabad and actually take charge and actually make the medication very well. We need to transfer our thinking and transition from going to say people make medicines. People don't make medicines. Machines make medicines. Our only job is actually to take care of machines. So this is now from a pharma skill, we need to transition into an engineering skill. This is extremely important. And I think the new way of thinking, the graduates from our fantastic universities need to come up with these engineering kind of thinking with predictive maintenance, with IoTs, and ensure that we are able to transition into a domain where we don't need to be worried about failure at all. How do we manage quality is something that we need to look at.
Thank you. Thanks, Krishna. I think since we are running short of time, I think all of you put a very nice perspective on the pharma industry, especially starting with quality. Then looking at technology and how technology can really help us to leverage on the optimization and also efficiency improvement. I can say that with their kind of experience, I mean, they are ready to imbibe on all kinds of technologies that can be made available. And I think these insights were quite useful. I leave the floor open for any questions from the audience here. We can take one or two questions. Yes, please.
Hello. So in the last session and even in this session, I see an overlap where the skilling aspect perhaps is something which might be something like that is a concern to any deep tech industry. So is that something which you guys are have any thoughts on, like the quality of talent and how we can maybe kind of address that? And that's in two areas. One is I think just people who will operate machines and the other kind of talent will actually drive innovation and R&D. So what are your thoughts on both of those areas?
Sorry, the question is quality of talent in India, ability, skilling. Yeah, I think extremely important. Like in was the earlier session towards the end of the last session, and everyone was unanimous in pointing out that availability of talent and skilling is an important factor. Same is true for all industries. But look, we're a country of 1.4 billion. Okay, not everything was hunky dory in the past, and I think it's quickly changing. It's not, ideally, if we had much more skilled, available people, it would have been great. But all of us to play a role. I mean, I was again in the last session also. Industry is playing a big role. Each of the organized industries in pharma are playing a big role in skilling and trying to so only to look up to government to do something is not very fair because it's a big country with a lot of challenges. So I think we have to also sort of put our shoulders together in trying to skill and fully agree that's a key problem. I think the headroom for growth and value addition is enormous. So this is one of the big sort of challenges for the industry. Please.
Yeah, I think I'll address it in two areas. I think what we are thinking is, at least in our company, is there are specific areas where you need to have subject matter experts, and that is non-negotiable. If you want to have your entire system run with subject matter experts, you keep butting your head against the skilling problem all the time. So I'll put it at a ratio of 20% subject matter experts, and the remaining 80% of the people should actually be doing work that is de-skilled. So, one of the targets is, for example, where I work in injectables, I need a person to come in and train for 6 to 9 months before they come in. It's a colossal waste of time. And that is because I have operations in my system that relies on a person to come and exercise his learning and his judgment to actually manufacture a product. It's a no, it's not a good way to look at it. But so if I de-skill my operation through automation, through simplified procedures and all of that stuff, then it becomes easier. But you will always have a certain level of subject matter expertise that are required. And I'm talking about manufacturing. This ratio probably goes to about 50-50 in R&D because it is more knowledge driven, more driven around why you do things. But this ratio should be determined on what area of skilling that is important. And I think every company today, and I'm sure that is true of Syngene as well, is invests very, very heavily on training. One is the regulatory training, which is required, but also around the concept of I need good people who can think and execute what they are supposed to do and exercise their judgment when the judgment is required. So this is a problem in industry. It is one of the impediments and actually for us to break free into the next area, and we have to focus on it very clearly. But I think small pockets of answers. There's not one big stroke that will solve it.
Let me add one more component to it, which is about skilling. Absolutely important. Everything that Abhijit mentioned, Krishna mentioned, is all absolutely true. However, one of the things that was brought up earlier is India's advantage today is cost arbitrage, and we have to recognize that cost arbitrage comes through labor cost. So there's a balance of exactly as was just mentioned, how much talent do you have of what skill set in which part of your operation. And so that is a conscious decision that we have to make. That is the conscious ecosystem that we need to build on having the right level of talent with the right skill set in the right unit operations in the entire value chain. Coming to the R&D part of it, again, the very good points. The fact of the matter is that we do want to get into that, but we are not there today. So whatever nuggets of wisdom that we have and whatever opportunities that we have, we need to bring in. That's where we need to start looking at things even more globally. China, for example, has this 1,000 talent program and so on. Right? What is the equivalent of that we can bring in, where the government can participate, industry can participate, and then of course all of our friends who are in other skilled areas or industries outside the country can bring in. We as a CRO actually see a role in that as well. Because today we are doing that same innovation, but we are doing it for the companies in the West. So we obviously have the talented scientists who can do that, even though in small pockets, because the CRO CDMO industry is limited within the entire value chain of pharmaceutical industry in India. But what is it that we are offering, and how can we make sure that that innovation can be brought in? So there is a number of these components that do need to be put in, because it's a question that is worth and does need to be continuously addressed.
Because they actually just in the other session, like I'll just talk without the mic if it's fine.
Yeah, sure.
So basically, I think there's a theme around lack of original work or design, let's say in the semiconductor space or the aerospace space. We are doing great quality work, but for others. And that's true, I guess, across many industries. But what is the barrier to taking it to the next step where we do that original work and create a local IP? And
so, what you're referring to is a different problem, which is about how do you create IP in India, and how does India get on the value chain of actually having innovative products. Yeah, which is about how do you don't have any NCs and so on and so forth.
Yeah. So finally, the value creation in pharma is about new molecules, new biological products, large molecules. Issue is like this, very simple. Not that we don't need it. We of course need it. You need to have very deep pockets. There is decades of wealth of experience in the West, and the depth of the ability to fund that actually. And of course, last but not the least, vibrant startup ecosystem. It's happening. My personal view, and I may be wrong, I think Japan, the way innovation started, was looking at specific diseases which are relevant there, and then slowly the larger companies, Takeda and all that, came to that when they started many decades back. I think, again, back to my point of emerging markets, there are diseases which are in tropical areas which are not addressed that well, because, the prevalence of that may be less in the West. The ability, why should West fund into those when that's not a, because, the returns from these parts of the world, I think it's time for us to take a lead on those. As I said, it's a large population. Maybe it may not return as well as the West, but getting into the entry barriers are because those are sort of areas which are less explored. Whereas trying to find needle in the haystack with a ability to fund which is thin is not easy. As much as one would like to do it, and all companies are trying, in India. But I think the emerging market unmet needs is a big area. I think one should focus on.
That's great. When you say deep pockets, the company should also be ready to say that there's no guarantee that it will work. Okay, and at the end of it, 15, 20 years later, you realize that your efforts didn't pay off. I mean, it's not that you put in money and you're bound to get some results. So that kind of NC is a very difficult thing to handle. But yeah, a lot of companies are trying to put in their money. Let's hope something comes up. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for all your time and all the knowledge and wisdom that you brought in this forum. I'm sure the audience did enjoy this session. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.